we go. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here for this webinar, Behind the Scenes, How to Submit Strong Proposals to 2025 TrustCon and Summits. We do have some folks joining us live here on the webinar. I think a lot of you are going to be watching this after the fact, the recording up on YouTube. Either way, this is great information for you as you're thinking about how to submit your proposals for our conferences this year. My name is Charlotte Willner. I'm here with Maggie Kerr. We work at TSPA, or the Trust and Safety Professional Association. I'm the executive director here, and I'm coming up on my 4-year anniversary with TSPA. And TSPA is only about 4 years old, so how about that? In case you're not familiar with TSPA, or you're only familiar with TSPA through having attended a conference, we are a professional association that supports online trust and safety teams in developing the expertise and skills and relationships they need to navigate this unique profession of ours. TSPA is a forum for professionals to connect with a network of their peers, to find resources for their own career development, and to exchange ideas about both emerging and eternal challenges in our professional practice. And a key way we deliver on this mission is through our conferences. So we have TrustCon and our 2 regional summits in EMEA and in APAC. Together, these events serve right now about 2,000 people globally, a little more, probably this year, a little more. The majority of our attendees are trust and safety professionals, but TrustCon and the summits also bring in people working in academic research and civil society, government, law enforcement. As we talk to you all about what makes for a strong proposal, we're going to give you an overview of who the audience is, the types of topics you should be considering, and just what this audience is really interested in and looking forward to as part of their conference experience. So with that, we're going to start by explaining, hey, what is TrustCon? What are the summits? So there is a difference. The types of submissions are going to be pretty similar. The quality bar is the same, but there are sort of differences in experiences between TrustCon and the summits. TrustCon is sort of our flagship global conference. It prioritizes content for the global trust and safety community. So there certainly are regionally oriented presentations at TrustCon, but you can in general expect a much more global audience. TrustCon does require presenters to travel to San Francisco, California, in the United States, and present in person. TrustCon is 3 days, and there are multiple tracks. So there are different types of topical tracks for different types of audiences. Again, recognizing it's our largest event and our most global one. The summits are designed around the needs of the local communities in EMEA and in APAC. The summits require presenters to travel to Dublin or in Singapore, and that's 2025. I will note some of you may be watching this several months after we record it in preparation to submit for the APAC summit. We think it's going to be in Singapore. It could be somewhere else in APAC. We haven't actually determined that venue yet. So if I'm talking about the Singapore summit later and actually it's not the Singapore summit, don't worry, it's still relevant. The summits do feature a 1 day of programming designed to meet the needs of the region. And this is new this year. There's also going to be a 2nd day of professional development programming open only to TSPA members. So those are some of the differences you want to keep in mind as you're thinking about what type of content to submit to what type of event. Next up, all right. Where can you find the call for proposals? Good news. Here are your links. You'll be going to be able to go there. Something you will notice this year is that there are a few different submission types. There are some specific notes about some types of submission types and how many speakers. We are going to go over that, but everything we talk about today can be found on these 2 websites. If you go through the entire call for proposals page and your question is unanswered, please email us. You can email TrustCon at TrustCon-program@tspa.org. If you have a question about a summit proposal, you can email summits@tspa.org. We really want you to email us your questions so you can't find them on the website, because we'd love to put the questions onto the website. Because if you have this question, chances are other people do too, and we want to be sure you don't have to email us to get an answer. All right, next up. How do I submit a proposal? All right. A number of you I can see here with us live have submitted a proposal to one of these events before. If you submitted to TrustCon last year, you worked in a system called Xordo. If you submitted to a summit last year or in any prior year, you were using probably Swoogo. I think first TrustCon, we probably used Google Forms. You know, we've evolved. We are now consolidating our entire submission process in Xordo. And there are some particularities about Exordo we're going to talk about in a minute. But the good news for you is you only need to create one account. There are two different subsites, and for the APAC Summit, there will be a third subsite, but you just need one Exordo account to be able to log into any of the submission portals. You will need to create an account. You'll need to be able to start a new abstract for each proposal that you submit. If you want to submit the same thing to both events, we'll talk a little bit about that, but chances are you'll want to submit that in two places. Important, you can edit your proposal until the submission deadline, but once the deadline has passed, you cannot edit or you cannot, submit late. We have a lot of days open for this call for proposals. So I really hope we don't get an email that's like, I'm sorry, I just forgot, and now it's 2 days later, and please accept my submission. We try to keep it really fair. But the important thing for you to know is you can submit, and if you don't have all the details, but you want to be sure it's in and you can come back later, go ahead and submit it. You have that time to edit your submission up until we close the entire call for proposals. Another thing to know about Exordo, especially if you've been working in another system before, is that they provide email support of their own. So if you are like having a problem with your account, we actually, as part of our contract with them, you can get support directly from the team at Exordo.
Awesome. So one note about
Oh,
Exordo.
I would say I'll just pause and say, as a reminder, if you've just joined us, we do have the Q&A box open. And so put any of the questions you have into Q&A. We'll be answering those live if we can, so that it makes it into the recording, or we'll make sure this get answered in some other way. So Maggie.
Yes. So one particularity about Exordo that some people have found confusing is their terminology. So Exordo was originally created for academic conferences, and so they use the term author to talk about the person submitting. But there are two types of authors, and that's important for you as a submitter. A presenting author is a person who is either a panelist, a moderator, a speaker, somebody who is going to be running the session. And then a corresponding author is the person who is in charge of all the communication between us and either the presentation or the panel or whatever it is. So if you're submitting and you are the corresponding author, you are the person who will get the news about whether whether it's accepted. You're the person that we will be sending reminders to. You are the person who needs to be accepting that you will be presenting once we offer you a spot. So if there's any revise and resubmits, those will go to the corresponding author. So that person can be the same as the presenting author, but it doesn't have to be. And those roles were a little bit confusing to folks last year. So we just want to make sure those terms are clear. That's also on the website and in the guide. Once you log into Exordo, you'll see a guide on how to submit. That terminology is in that guide. But just wanted to clarify that in this webinar as well.
And I'll just add quickly, I think the most common use case for a corresponding author not being the same as a presenting author is if you're working at a company where someone is like the point of contact for all submissions. So if you work at an organization where you want to have one person working on submitting everybody on the team's proposals, that's the corresponding author, but then all of the different presenters would be the presenting authors. Really important, if you are a corresponding author and you leave the company, please make sure that you have designated a new corresponding author, because you are the point of contact that we have, and it gets really confusing if we don't know who to reach out to afterwards.
All right. What are the different submission types? We've got a couple new this year.
Yes, so different submission types. Apologies to the lightning talk enthusiasts of yore, because we have put a pause on lightning talks this year. We're going to see how it goes. You can send me the hate mail, trustcon-program@tspa.org. But we do have two new types of submissions that we think you're really going to enjoy. So 5 total. The first submission type we have is the presentation. That's a 20-minute talk with Q&A. Slides are optional. Q&A really isn't optional, though. You should be prepared to talk about your work. Typically, presentations at TrustCon are going to be, and actually in all circumstances, all events, those are going to be paired with another presentation of a similar theme. And then people are able to get some conversation going. We don't know for sure at this moment whether we're going to continue to pair them or we're going to break them out. There's some good scheduling reasons to continue to pair them, but just something you should expect. Presentations are, oh, actually, we're gonna talk about how many speakers on the next slide, so we'll get there. Full panel. A full panel is a 50-minute thematic discussion with 3 to 4 panelists and a moderator. Q&A is optional for these, but it is encouraged. People in the audience really like Q&A. That's feedback we get consistently in the survey. Important to note here that if you are submitting a panel, it's really important that you have a diversity of perspective on the panel. People really hate going to a panel and realizing all the panelists agree with each other. Similarly, if you're like, I want to do a panel and everyone works at your company or in your organization, think about like, all right, how diverse is this actually going to be as a set of opinions? Because those typically aren't accepted as just not being informative or it's just not being informative enough. Workshops. Workshops are a 90 or 120-minute interactive session. It's not a presentation. It does have a required post-workshop deliverables. Usually that's just like a one-page write-up telling the community, hey, this is what we discussed. Here's what we learned. Here are the outcomes. There need to be up to, or there can be up to 50 participants. Workshops typically go between 20 and 50 signups, and you can let us know what the appropriate amount is. We also are introducing roundtables. So some of you, if you've been at our summits this year, have participated in a roundtable, but we are bringing roundtables now to all 3 events. These are 90-minute in-depth discussion about a specific topic with guidance from a facilitator. Those are typically for 20. They can have up to 40 participants if you've got 2 facilitators. The key difference to keep in mind about the difference between a workshop and a roundtable is that a workshop really has like an end product, a deliverable at the end. A roundtable doesn't have to. You don't have to go into a roundtable and saying, we are going to solve world peace. That is, I mean, if you want to do that, we'd love that. We welcome that submission. But that is not the expectation for a roundtable. It's really just a place to have a pressing conversation. Finally, the last new submission type we have this year is a community activity. So if you are a member of TSPA, you can propose, hey, we want to just do an activity that builds relationships between the community members. It is something we're trying at TrustCon this year. If it works at TrustCon, maybe we bring it to the summits. So the summits have their own community days. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This can be a lunch about a particular topic, a particular area of interest. This can be, we're all going to go for a walk and we're going to go bird watching and we're going to check out the pelicans over at the ferry building. This can be, we're going to go to the farmer's market and talk to each other about our favorite recipes. It can be on-site, off-site. It's just, hey, listen, I'm just trying to get some. It doesn't have to be alcohol oriented. It doesn't have to be a happy hour. It is something we're really excited about, and we hope that folks submit. We want to see your creative ideas.
And we did, just a note on this, if you want to see examples, we did do some community activities last year. If you go to the TrustCon website from last year, and there's a community hub tab, you can see some examples of community activities if you want some inspiration. All right.
All right. How many speakers?
How many speakers are allowed?
How many speakers are allowed? All right. For your panels, you can have between 3 and 4 panelists and 1 moderator. That is 5 speakers total. It really has to be 5. It cannot be 6. Please don't make it 6 because I didn't rent enough chairs for that. And chairs are very expensive, as it turns out. So please, 5. We ask you to have a panel has to have at least 2 discussants and a moderator. It really needs to be 3 to be a panel. Otherwise, it's kind of a facilitated fireside chat. So please get your 3 to 4 panelists and your moderator. When you submit, we strongly advise that you have confirmed all of your panelists and made sure that they are available on the dates of the event and that they have or are very likely to get organizational authorization to speak, because you as the corresponding author are otherwise going to be responsible for tracking down other approved panelists and putting them onto your panel once you've been accepted. Please also let us know when you submit who the moderator is, because that is something we often have to go back to and be like, who's driving this thing? Let us know if you already know. For a presentation, there is 1 speaker. There are no co-presenters. This one breaks our heart every year because we know that so many things in trust and safety are not a one-person product. They're like a team product. You have a collaborator. The reason we have a 1 speaker rule is twofold. One is that it just gets real hairy trying to get 2 people up for 20-minute sessions, then Q&A, and then switching to the next. Like, that's just a lot of details. The other is honestly, we do give pretty significant discounts for speakers, and it's just financially difficult for us as a nonprofit to say, yes, absolutely, two discounted speakers for one 20-minute presentation. The numbers start to be painful. If you want to bring your collaborator to that session, they can help to answer questions in the Q&A piece of it. That's totally fine. We just can't have two of you up there at the microphone for the presentation itself. For workshops, we require two co-facilitators max. You absolutely can have one facilitator for workshops, but we would advise you to think about who your backup is if you get sick, because people really look forward to the workshops. They sign up in advance, and it's just a bummer if you wake up that day and realize, wow, I have the flu and I cannot give this, and there's no backup. So be thinking about that when you submit. Roundtables, similarly, two facilitators max. We require two facilitators if you want to have 40 participants. All right.
And just a note on the roundtables as well. For that, the reason we require two facilitators is because we'll do like two parallel conversations. And so you'll need one per table basically to run those conversations. All right. What makes a strong proposal?
What you've all been waiting for. All right. Um, all types of submissions benefit from details and data. So the feedback we have gotten at TrustCon and at the summits most consistently every year we've run them is people say, this was awesome. I loved getting to know people who do my type of work. I wish it'd been more specific. I wish I'd heard a lot more practical detail about this case study, or like people giving sort of theory of what they do, but I want to hear more about the practical nitty gritty. It is almost impossible to make your proposal too detailed. We really encourage you to put as much detail as you can to help both the program committee understand what is this about, but also to attract people to your session once it's accepted, and to help people understand sort of what to come prepared with and what they're going to walk away with. It's really important when you submit, as much as possible, give the program committee and ultimately the audience a sense of like, what's the takeaway? What will they be able to leave your session with that's novel, that is going to inform their practice in an immediate way? Um, as I mentioned, the full panel proposals should include different points of view. Make sure that you have not nominated 3 to 4 panelists who all agree with each other. That is real boring. Though, I mean, it could be funny, it could be fun, right? You might be nice people, but that it's hard to be competitive in the pool that we have if you've got a bunch of people who agree. Workshop proposals should describe an interactive and engaging session. We mentioned a little earlier, it's not a presentation. It is not a workshop. If you're like, I did a report and I want to just make sure everybody knows about it, that's a presentation. That's not a workshop. A workshop has to be something where a group is working through a problem together. Um, Presentation proposals should be scoped to 20 minutes. Sometimes we get proposals that are like, I could talk for 5 minutes about this. And sometimes we get like, I wrote a dissertation about this. I am prepared to defend it in the amount of time you give me. And that's unfortunately is not going to work in 20 minutes. So just be thinking about, do you have enough material in here, or do you have too much material in here for a presentation? Roundtable proposals should include discussion questions. We need to know when the program committee is going through your proposal, like what is going to get talked about, so that we are able to match that against other sessions, understand which are the strongest sessions that are addressing these questions. Note, actually, we are requiring panels to submit a draft of questions in advance as well. So if you're submitting a panel, you'll see that in Exordo. Please be sure you're submitting questions there too. Community activities should be targeted. And the pro tip we have here is co-organize with another community member. So there we're going to be asking you, like, who is this for? Who do you hope shows up? What do you want to be able to facilitate for people as a get together?
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the program committee. So for folks who are newer to our process, we want to kind of demystify what the program committee is. Once you submit your proposal, a committee is going to be reviewing that proposal. So who are those people? So for each of our different summits, or sorry, each of our different conferences, including TrustCon and both summits, we put together a program committee comprised of volunteers who are trust and safety practitioners from all over the world with diverse backgrounds and different areas of expertise. For the summits, those folks need to be in region. So for the APAC summit, they are all based in APAC. for the EMEA Summit, they are all based in EMEA. There are a few exceptions where people have very specific skill sets that we need support reviewing, but almost none of those folks will be based outside of the region. And so they are all folks who are in our membership, and they will be evaluating sessions. Myself, Charlotte, and Christy Kozak, who is our senior program manager, are also part of the program committee. So what do they do? So their responsibilities include reviewing and scoring proposals. So they'll be reading all of your proposals. They will be giving a proposal a meta review in some ways. So we have some folks who are reading through the reviews given by the committee and then kind of summarizing them. Shepherding submissions. So if folks are invited to revise and make tweaks to their proposal and resubmit, they'll be working through that process, about helping us balance the sessions at TrustCon and EMEA. So we sometimes go to them and say, okay, we've got a lot of really great proposals around child safety. How can we balance these to make sure that we're targeting, like the most high value sessions and not having a bunch of sessions that are repetitive? And they're also collaboratively creating the conference agenda. So similarly, we'll sometimes work with committee members to design the overall agenda. A large part of what they do is reviewing. So each proposal gets 3 independent reviews. It's a single blind, so they can see who submitted, but they aren't able to see each other's reviews. And they will go through and score and provide feedback based on the criteria that's on the website. So if you go to the website, you'll see exactly what criteria they're using to evaluate sessions. And they'll score those reviews, or sorry, they'll score the proposals, and then they will also provide feedback. And that feedback will be provided to you at the end, regardless of whether your proposal was submitted or not. We aim to provide feedback and be as transparent as possible, partly just so that you have the feedback, and then also partly if you're looking to submit in the future and your proposal wasn't accepted, what are the things that were really strong and you don't need to tweak, and what are the things that you might want to tweak for future sessions or for future proposals. If your proposal was accepted, you'll still get that feedback and you'll know what the committee liked the most about it and where you should really lean in. Some main criteria that they use is originality. So does the proposal present a new topic, voice, or perspective? This is something that I see a lot. I'm trying to think of like where I see this tripped up a little bit. Sometimes when people are proposing sessions where they're used to presenting that topic at like many different conferences, they sometimes will propose the session as is versus thinking about a trust and safety practitioner audience. So if, for example, you're an expert in misinformation, think through what trust and safety practitioners may already know in their roles about misinformation and where your voice can be like additive in that conversation. Relevance, is this relevant to this community? Is this relevant to this year? In terms of the summits, we also have another piece of relevance, which is if it's relevant to that region. So if you're thinking about presenting in EMEA, for example, think about what is most relevant to an EMEA audience versus kind of a global audience. And then how does it propose to contribute to the trust and safety profession? So you'll fill that out as you're filling out your proposals. All right. What does the program committee not do? And how do we not make decisions about how we select proposals? So here's what's not factored into selections. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, you guys have a bunch of corporate supporters. You must accept a lot of their proposals. Oh, we do, and they're great proposals, but that doesn't impact whether or not we select a proposal. TrustCon sponsorship, there's lots of perks of being a TrustCon sponsor, but one of them is not having proposals automatically selected. The only exception to sponsorship and speaking is we do have sponsorship remarks that some sponsors will give at the beginning of the day, but that doesn't go through this program committee process. That's outside of that process. Being a VIP or a big name in trust and safety, a lot of folks, I'm so grateful in the trust and safety community, are strong presenters and propose great sessions and are also big names. They're big names for a reason. It just doesn't automatically weight someone in one direction. So if they've got a lot of presentations under their belt, or they've presented a lot of different spaces, that doesn't automatically sort of get them accepted. Member status, similar to corporate supporter status, regardless of whether you're a member or not, you're able to propose a session. And lastly, being a member of the program committee. I will say, being a member of the program committee does give people insight into the whole process. And I think I know myself reading through a lot of proposals and getting used to sort of that process does give me, more confidence if I was to submit my own proposal. And so if you're considering being a program committee in the future, a member in the future, I would think about it. But it does not, program committee members are able to submit proposals, but they go through the same process, three independent reviews. They don't see their own proposal. And so we try to keep things really fair.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Maggie mentioned earlier that it's single blind and not double blind. We've gone
Yes.
back and forth every year about whether we should make it double blind, and every year we decide not to. And the reason is because we do think it's important to be able to get new voices in at TrustCon, and we can't know that unless it's single blind. We do have a pretty rigorous uh, recusal process. I'm like, what's the word? If you work at TSPA as an example, you really shouldn't review someone else who is submitting from TSPA. And so we rely on our program committee to be acting very ethically, and they do. We love working with our program committees every year. Um, but if you ever have questions about like, hey, my company submitted a lot of things and we didn't get anything accepted, or I saw that company submitted a lot of things and they got three things accepted, always just talk with us about it. We're always happy to talk to you about how those decisions get made, the types of things we're balancing when it comes to representation, new voices, originality, things like that. The thing to keep in mind about all these conferences is one of the like explicit aims of TrustCon and the summits is to help people develop a professional speaking presence from within the profession. And so, this thing about being a big name, like I love big names. Big names are great out there. We love you. And also you've had a turn, right? A lot of what we're able to offer at TSPA is the opportunity for people who would really benefit from a turn getting that chance up on stage. And so if you are watching this as a new presenter, maybe you've never spoken professionally before, this event is for you too, and we can't wait to have your submission. This is for you.
Yeah, and if you're organizing a panel, think about panelists who haven't gotten that chance before, especially if you have some folks who are seasoned and will be great on a panel. It's a great opportunity to include someone who hasn't had that chance to have their expertise shared. Okay, dates. Charlotte, this is you.
This is me. All right. TrustCon 2025. TrustCon will be July 21st through 23rd in San Francisco this year. The call for proposals is open now, which is why we're speaking at this moment. It will close February 24th, 2025. So it will have been open for 91 days. We have committed to sending decisions from the program committee about acceptance status by April 18th, and we're hoping to then publish the agenda by May 12th. I will say the agenda publish date is always a little up in the air because a lot of that depends on how many people have in fact confirmed that they're coming. Inevitably, there's someone who submitted this thing and then they're like, oops, I have a different job. We got to arrange this. So there's some wiggliness there. But the main thing you need to know at this stage is if you are submitting for TrustCon 2025, you have to have your proposal in by February 24th, 2025, Pacific, like end of business Pacific time. So if you're submitting from APAC, keep that in mind. You technically have the 25th, but don't write that down. Submit early. One thing I will say is that we do see over 75% of our submissions come in the final 72 hours, which makes us nervous, frankly. But we will be on hand to help you get over the line. Let's see. I think in terms of the next slide, let's go to the next slide here because there is, oh yes, okay, we're going to talk about the different tracks and we're going to talk about something called revise and resubmit. This was a question earlier in the webinar. What are the different tracks for TrustCon? You will see in Exordo, tracks are called topics in certain places, and that's just because of the architecture of Exordo. We are soliciting proposals for child safety, engineering, investigations and intelligence, operations, partnerships, policy, product, and research. And if you want to submit something that you don't think falls into one of those categories, pick the next nearest. If you're in design, maybe that's product or maybe that's partnerships, depending on sort of how you're talking about like, design. If that is listen, I'm not going to come up with hypotheticals. I haven't had 2 cups of coffee yet.
Tooling is a
Tooling's a great one, right? Maybe that is
engineering or
operation,
product or
engineering, right?
operations.
Just do your best, and we will figure it out. We do have a question in the chat. What does investigations and intelligence mean? That's typically like investigations and escalations. So things like this is an emerging threat area, and we did a research paper on all the different ways that sextortion manifested in this particular jurisdiction, things like that. So that's the answer there. How do you define research? Great question. So research does not need to be like published research or publishable research. We're not an academic conference. We don't have conference proceedings. So we don't have like sort of that bar for research. We welcome any type of research into trust and safety oriented topics. So historically, we've had a lot of submissions here around like wellness and resilience practices. We have submissions around interventions for end users, what works and what doesn't. There have been research papers, I think, particularly in the child safety realm, about just behavioral mechanics for offenders and how you sort of think about those when it comes to policy and enforcement. It can really be anything research oriented that is also trust and safety oriented. Someone says, if we don't know what track our topic would fall under, are we able to engage with us? You absolutely can ask, but here's the thing. One thing we have learned is that people honestly are just going to submit into tracks, and then we always help them figure out, like, you said this was partnerships, but actually I think this is operations or things like that. So don't stress too much. We aren't grading you based on like, what track did you submit under? We just need your definition of like what's the best bet. You're also going to have the opportunity to select secondary themes that give more information. So if you're like, hey, this is about, as an example, wellness and resilience. We're not running a wellness and resilience track necessarily, but if your thing is about wellness and resilience, maybe it's operations, maybe it's research, pick your best bet, but then in the secondary category, say it's wellness and resilience, and we'll be able to sort it.
Yeah.
All right, next. We do a process called desk rejects. Last year, we only had to do 3 desk rejects, so that's great. We're going to keep that going. Desk rejected proposals are ones that do not go to the program committee. They come to TSPA staff. We look at them and we gauge, is this incomplete or incoherent, right? Sometimes we get in like the chat GPT stuff. Don't do that. Or at least remove the prompts. I don't know, choose your own adventure. But it's also things like really clear product, services, or sales pitches. We do not accept sales pitches and demos at TrustCon. It is the worst to get a survey response from someone who's like, I thought I was going to go into a session to learn something, and instead, all I heard about was like this guy's invention. Like, let's not do that. So we do we do our best to reject those before those go to the program committee. And finally, any proposals that reinforce existing biases or assumptions. We don't get a lot of these, thankfully, from our community. But if you've got don't submit something racist. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. We're going to desk reject it.
Yeah, or incomplete proposals, like if it's one sentence and there's no detail at all.
Yeah, this is the risk of relying on being able to go back and edit. I know at the beginning I was like, don't worry, if you're confident you're going to come back and complete it, you can submit it. You got to be confident because we will otherwise reject it if it's obviously incomplete.
All right. So how
All right.
does a revise and resubmit work? What is it?
What is it? So this is something we are doing for TrustCon, but not for the summits, at least this year. Some of you have actually been through this process, but for the rest of you watching, we do a process called revise and resubmit. I believe it comes from academia. I am unfortunately not an academic, but I believe this is a thing. This is a scenario where a proposal is reviewed by the program committee. it receives a low score for, any number of reasons, but the committee is like, oh, but if it just made these changes, this would be phenomenal for the program. It's situations where, maybe it's someone who's never submitted before. The submission like doesn't exactly have like all the detail we would want, but we can tell they work for an organization that's doing incredible work in trust and safety. They maybe come from a really underrepresented region when it comes to our speaker pool. They've never spoken at TrustCon before. Like there's a variety of reasons where we want to encourage them with a little extra feedback. In those cases, we reach out before the decision deadline. We say, hey, this is what we really liked about this. We believe that in the next 2 weeks, you can firm up the following details. We're going to assign you a shepherd who's going to work with you to make sure that the changes that we're asking have been made. And then we ask you to revise and resubmit within 2 weeks. We then review your proposal and make a final decision. We call these R&Rs. Some of the R&Rs are actually really straightforward. Maybe you've everything looks good, but your title is like not really descriptive of the content. We might go back to you and say, hey, we want to accept this, but your title's wild. Like, would you change it? Sometimes, often, honestly, it's about the panelist lineup where the questions look good, but you've got like a really non-diverse panel. We do reserve the right to go back to you and say, hey, topically this is cool, but surely you can find anybody, from the global south to speak to this issue that affects everybody in the global south. So we do, and so some of you on this call have had us do this to you, so I know you understand and you're still interested in submitting, so thank you. It's really important to us that the folks on stage at TrustCon look like our community, and our community is incredibly global. It's incredibly diverse. And it's just a real bummer when folks, come into a session and say, I can't relate to this. Like, this is just not reflective of my experience. So we do work with panel submitters a lot on that particular issue, and that's a common reason for an R&R.
Common one is a panel about content moderation that has no content moderators on it.
Great example, right? Think about it. You might want to involve a content moderator if it's about it. Another common one actually is the panelist lineup looks great and like the topic looks great, but you've included no questions. So please, please include your draft questions. They don't have to be final. We just need a draft.
One also know about revise and resubmits because in theory, almost anything could be a revise and resubmit. We only select ones where every single aspect of it is really strong, but then there's one thing that needs to be changed.
Mhm.
So to be a revise and resubmit versus getting feedback about what to change for next time, it really has to be something that we feel like it's a standout session, but
Mhm.
there's like one thing that just needs to change versus just there's some feedback about the session.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, let's talk about the upcoming deadline. So this is about EMEA because we don't have deadlines for the APAC summit yet. So if you are watching this back for APAC, there'll be a website for the APAC summit, but this one is about the EMEA summit. Whoops. So we have the summit, the CFP is open now. And it closes on January 27. So we've got 63 total days where the CFP for EMEA is open. Decisions will be sent on February 10, and the final agenda will be published by March 6. How are summit proposals different? So a lot of the things that we've talked about apply to all of our conferences. So the standards that we have to review apply across all of our conferences. And the criteria that we use generally is the same. There are a couple of differences in summits versus TrustCon. So summits have themes and sub-themes that are important to adhere by. We have the program committee select a theme for the summit. Every program committee for each summit selects a new theme. And because it's just a shorter program than TrustCon, we want to make sure that we're focusing the content on the things that are the most topical for this year in that region. And so check out the theme and the sub themes. There's sort of like tracks, but that will guide you in terms of like what will be most accepted and prioritized at summits. Next one is summits must adhere to the region and the theme. So a great example is if you have general research about, I don't know, content moderation tools or something like that. If you can slice the data by what is most important in that region versus just like the global population. Or another one is if you're looking at, policy, thinking through what regulations are in that region versus regulations in the US or regulations globally. Um, so really considering what is going to be most relevant for that community. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out at summits at tspa.org. Um, Summits are 1 day events in terms of like the overall program. So we'll have a second day this year that is dedicated to professional development, and a majority of that will be programming that we're building, and it's networking and skills trainings and things like that. But for the proposals to be accepted, the majority of them will be the first day. And so just a note that you're less likely to have multiple submissions accepted just because it's 1 day and we're trying to prioritize, as many speakers as possible. And so you're less likely to have, you can submit multiple selection submissions. We had somebody submit 15 last year at one of our conferences. And so I think they got 14 rejected. So it's totally fine to submit multiple, just know that you're likely to have more rejections. And then lastly, summits include a second professional development day for TSPA members this year. That's new. And as I mentioned, we'll be publishing more about that shortly, but basically that'll be skills training. So things like investigations training, data analysis. We haven't sort of finalized the selection yet. We're working with the program committee on that. But that'll be all geared towards helping advance the practice of trust and safety for practitioners. And I think that's the end of our slides, and we can move into Q&A.
We do have a few questions lined up, and I'm going to
Yeah.
give you a moment to ask some more questions while I give you a piece of information that was frequently asked after we sent out decision notifications last year for TrustCon. These are numbers I'm going to give you for TrustCon specifically. They're not the summits, but something we are noticing as we go into our fourth year running TrustCon is that it's getting really selective. It's getting really competitive. I think the first year we ran it, we were like, hope anyone submits anything. That was probably like a 50% acceptance rate across the board. And that's not where we're at anymore. So, this last year for TrustCon, we had an acceptance rate between 26 and 36%. So we had panels were our most competitive. That was a 26% acceptance rate. Presentations were 36%. So it was like a little more likely on presentations. We do expect that rate to continue to go down for a couple reasons. One is that we're just getting better and better and better submissions every year. And it's just like, it's really hard. It's really hard to choose between these incredible submissions. And we're just getting more. Last year we got 500 submissions just for TrustCon, and we're expecting more on top of that this year, just given the way that the event has grown. When you get an acceptance, it feels amazing. When you get a rejection, we really don't want you to feel rejected. Just know that it is a really it can be a really tough pool, and it's not about you. It's not about your work. Like, you are working in trust and safety. We love you. It's great. And hopefully the author feedback that we introduced last year and we're going to continue with this year helps you understand what people really loved, sort of what you can continue to offer to the community. Um, we have questions here. One is, can service providers apply to be on the program committee? The answer is yes. The caveat is that the program committee for EMEA and for our TrustCon has already been seated. So they are ready for service. We ran that application earlier this year. We will open the application for the APAC committee sometime in Q2, probably early Q2. Listen, sometime in Q2. And that's an opportunity to apply. We do require people to be a TSPA member to serve on the program committee. There's some exceptions we make for expert reviewers. So folks that are a member of the broader trust and safety ecosystem aren't necessarily a TSPA member, but we respect their expertise. We want a second opinion on, certain types of specialist submissions. We might invite them in without being a member, but in general, you do have to be a member of TSPA. This question is, do we have roundtables for both the summits and TSPA and TrustCon? Yes, roundtables are now at all three. Previously, they were just at summits. We have one saying, how many roundtables are there for participants to choose from? Maggie, I'm going to defer to you on this question. We've never run roundtables at TrustCon before. How many roundtables have we typically had at the summits this year?
So I think we had, since they're long and it's 1 day, we try to balance how many long sessions we're doing with some of the shorter sessions. I think we had 5 sessions that were longer at EMEA. So I think it was 3 roundtables and 2 workshops. And then I think it was maybe one less for APAC this year.
Mhm.
I expect that to be a larger number this year for TrustCon for sure.
Yeah.
The summits, because they're one day, where we just sort of, there's just less sessions overall. But I hope
Yeah.
that helps.
Last year, or this year, I guess, at TrustCon, we had approximately 40 panels, 66 presentations, 28 lightning talks, which now are not a format, and 16 workshops. So we're expecting to run probably between maybe 12 and 16 workshops, but some of that may get cannibalized by roundtables depending on the submissions. We have amazing roundtable submissions, like, oh, all right, we're going to do more of those. But that's where lightning talks are also making some room in the program. All right. We have a question. Does the committee prioritize submissions from trust and safety practitioners versus service providers? Well, I'm so glad you asked because it depends on what we mean by service providers. And, I don't know exactly the details in this question, but you watching it may have a different definition yourselves. Um, we consider anyone who is working in just the daily practice of creating and enforcing rules for the internet a trust and safety professional. And so that includes obviously people working in-house at different platform companies. That also includes a lot of employees of the business process outsourcing companies. So folks who are doing that frontline moderation, in a lot of different places around the world. All of those are who we would consider trust and safety practitioners, along with a lot of the people who work alongside them to like do the work of trust and safety. So that's our engineers, that's our tool designers, that's people who are figuring out what is the design of this reporting flow. That's our quality assurance folks. That's our user experience researchers, our data scientists. There's a lot of different things that go into what we consider trust and safety at TSPA. Law enforcement response, pop that in there. You can go to our website if you want to learn more about it. In general, the thing to keep in mind about these events is that they are for trust and safety practitioners. So we don't prioritize submissions only from practitioners to the exclusion of other types of voices, because we think it's really important that these be places that people who aren't practitioners but do work that really impacts the work of practitioners. We think it's important that they have a voice at TrustCon. So that's where we've got folks coming in from civil society, from governments, regulators, law enforcement, academic research. So we strive to have a balance of all of those voices in the program, but do keep in mind when you're doing the submission, the audience really, the primary target for these conferences are the professionals themselves. To have that answered your question. I do also want to go back through some of the questions we answered in chat. There were a few questions about how many sessions might be running concurrently. Maggie answered this a little bit with her answer about roundtables, but at summits, typically there are, between 2 and 4 concurrent sessions. Is that right, Maggie? I'm saying that.
Yeah, usually, yeah, it's 3 is the typical, and then sometimes we have one on, yeah, but
Yeah.
typically 4.
So between 2 and 4. TrustCon is a larger event. There are usually between 7 and 11 parallel sessions. So what that often looks like is if we're hosting, I don't know, 40 panels in 3 days, that means there's 3 crackerjack panels right next to each other, and you got to decide what. And then there's going to be, a few presentations running simultaneously. There's always at least 1 workshop, if not 2 workshops running during that time. So it's a pretty stacked agenda. A lot of the work that the program committee does post decisions is actually figuring out how to create an agenda that doesn't create wild FOMO for all of our attendees. We can't do that perfectly because we're a very liberal arts minded group, and we're very interdisciplinary. We love to be in every session, but we do really try to make sure that if you are coming for technical, or if you're coming for child safety, we're not stacking a bunch of competing sessions next to each other and making you choose. We try to thread those topics throughout to make sure that you're able to go to as much as possible.
Do we financially support applicants, and what extent,
And what is your criteria?
and what is your criteria?
Yes. All speakers do receive a discount to attend TrustCon if you have your session accepted. If you want to speak only on, or if you want to attend only on the day you're speaking, that's a free ticket, which is great value for money. But you're contributing your expertise and your time preparing your presentation or your panel, whatever your session is, and we want to recognize that and not charge you for that. If you plan to stay at the conference beyond the day you're presenting, we then offer a discounted rate. We're still finalizing the rates right now, so I'm not going to say what that is on this webinar, but that information is going to be available on our website really soon. If you are accepted for multiple sessions and you end up speaking on 2 different days, you get a further discount. And then if you end up speaking on 3 days, you're going to be really tired, but that would also be a free ticket if we get there. We also, independent of the speaker thing, we do offer financial assistance, and this goes to sort of the criteria. Our priorities for financial assistance every year are speakers and trust and safety professionals. We try as much as possible to offer financial assistance to anyone who requires it, but the truth is we are a nonprofit. Those of you attending this webinar from nonprofits know it's like not it's not the friendliest fundraising environment right now. I wish we had lots and lots of cash, and someday maybe we will, but that's never been the story of trust and safety, and it may not be ours either. So we do our very best to make sure that everyone who wants to be there can be there at a price that works for them. But the folks we really prioritize are the speakers, because we need to have you there to run the event, and then practitioners who work in the field and are really looking to use TrustCon as a way to further their professional development, because that's what's true to our mission. All right. Any other questions that we want to answer here? Going back through the chat, someone did ask if they're submitting a presentation, but presentations only have one speaker, can they add their collaborator in the submission? The answer is yes. If you want to name your collaborator or your team in the session description, you're totally welcome to. That is how a lot of folks acknowledge that this was a team effort. But again, only one speaker will be formally a speaker at that event, or at that session rather. Going back through here, I think we've actually answered a lot of the questions. All right.
Wonderful.
Is there anything else that this live group would like to know? I'm trying to think of other common questions we got last year to kind of pad the questions out here. Here we go, registration. I mentioned that there is a speaker discount for registration. Registration will open before you know whether your proposal has been accepted. Certainly for TrustCon, I think that will be true for EMEA as well. We do tend to sell these events out. And so every year we have a panicked group of folks who are like, well, I got to get my ticket now, because if I don't, I'm just not going to have a ticket. And you're not wrong. That is in fact often the case with these events, which is a great problem to have. We always hold tickets for speakers. And so if your session is accepted, you will have a seat at the event. We will make sure that you get there. If you want to go ahead and buy your ticket in case you don't get accepted as a speaker, that's fine. If you get accepted as a speaker, we'll do a refund for the amount difference, depending on the event and your speaking assignment. So in general, it's always a good idea to buy a ticket. But if you're caught up in organizational approvals, you don't know when that budget is hitting, if you get accepted as a speaker, you will be able to actually enter the event. We're saving you a ticket. Other things that come up, visas are always a big question, I think, especially as we, really work to prioritize submissions from, like folks who haven't spoken before, folks who are representative of the broader professional body. If you think you are going to need to go through a complicated visa process, we are here to support you. We know that often that timeline can be a little abbreviated, especially given our decision notification deadline. So if you have any questions as you submit about like, hey, if I get accepted, like, what do I need to know from like a visa perspective? We're happy to have that conversation with you. We're learning a lot about that every year. We're here to support you in that journey. Someone's asking, if accepted, will we be guaranteed a seat for every day of the event or just the day we present on? That's a great question. the summits are now 2 days. If you are a member of TSPA, you will be able to get access to that second day. I think we're still going to charge a discounted admission for that second day because you're not going to be speaking on that day. If you're not a TSPA member, you will not have access to that day regardless. You'll just have the speaker discount for the day you're speaking at the summit. For TrustCon, we don't do single day tickets. So yes, if you are accepted, you are guaranteed a seat for every day of the event because we sort of assume speakers are here and we just do the math saying everyone's going to be here all 3 days. We know that's not true, but like it helps us figure out the catering math. You just have to then decide, do you wish to attend all 3 days and pay that discounted rate for the 3 day pass, or do you just want to attend and do, I say we don't do 1 day tickets. We technically issue them for speakers if they're speaking on one day. And so if that's your choice, you're like, I'm going to do a $0 ticket and I'm going to show up just on that day. You'll check in at registration. You'll get like a special color probably of badge, and that's your souvenir. Next question. Possible first-time applicant to speak. I see I have my work cut out. Would appreciate connecting with a mentor who's gone through this process and is willing to help me organize my idea. Love this. Okay. Um, Maggie, you want to just talk a little bit about the coffee chats program because I feel like this is a
Yeah.
great use for coffee chats.
Yeah, two things. Last year, I talked to three people who had presented before and asked them for their tips on presenting, and tips for kind of preparing. And that is still live on our website. I can resurface it and add it to the session, link it in the description or something. But that would be a good place to check. And then our Coffee Chats program is a great resource for this. So if you go to tspa.org and you go to there's a Coffee Chats section. There are a bunch of hosts who are volunteering their time to mentor the community. Many of them have been speakers at TrustCon. So if you go to the TrustCon website, you can see all the speakers who have spoken in the past, and then you can cross-reference that with the Coffee Chats hosts program. But they would be a great resource of just running by your presentation, running your description by them. If you're trying to adjust your audience to the trust and safety audience and you want to talk to a practitioner, that would be another great resource. So definitely take advantage of that. I think that many of them have spoken before and would be happy to provide feedback.
All right. We have a question. Would Africa be a priority? Absolutely. And when we talk about the EMEA summit, EMEA is Europe, Middle East, Africa, right? I will flag that in the past year, it has started to feel a little more difficult to do visas from certain African countries into Ireland. That was something we had an experience with this last year, specifically out of Cameroon and Zimbabwe. So just if you are submitting, if you are from those countries and want to submit to these events, yeah, definitely do it. We absolutely want to host you. And we just need to get started working on that process for your visa as soon as we can.
Just quickly, someone asked if there were coffee chat sessions available in Africa. They're actually all online, so they're all virtual. So you're able to take advantage of that program from Africa.
Mhm.
Yes, visas can definitely be a headache. One note on visas, if you think you are needing a visa, we can provide letters of support. Please do that early so that you're not caught later having to do it last minute. As soon as you get accepted, we can provide you a letter of support from TSPA to support your process. All right.
Okay. Well, we're at the hour. My dog has started really loudly snoring, so I guess that's how exciting we are in this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us live. Thank you to everyone who is watching us later on YouTube. Again, if you have any questions that aren't covered on the website or weren't covered in the webinar, you can find us for TrustCon questions. It's trustcon-program@tspa.org. And for summits, it's summits@tspa.org. Thank you so much for all your interest in these events. We love to produce these for you. It's just such a gift for the community by the community, and we can't wait to see you at the conferences.